So won't the real LeBlanc please stand up? No, seriously, after doing all of this deep dive in the lore, I genuinely don't know which one that would be. This week we explore LeBlanc, the Deceiver. Welcome to Runeterra Tourist. I'm Patrick. I don't know anything about these people yet, so let's learn about them together. I hope everyone had a great pre-Rift and release day celebration, and even though I didn't really have the best of polls, I still had a really great time. This is a really fun set. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming here because we've got a lot to cover. LeBlanc has some of the deepest lore I've had to do yet, and this is due to not just her appearing in Arcane, but also the rework that she got done from Legends of Runeterra. She was one of the most developed before that with her introduction in League. She was this mid-lane burst assassin, creating mirror images of herself, confusing opponents, someone who has a really high skill ceiling. She's been repeatedly patched because she's either oppressively dominant or completely irrelevant. Players who love her are insanely devoted, and those who play against her are intensely frustrated and despise her. With the early release in China, we've already got to see that she's been competitive in play so far, and by the time this episode comes out, we're going to be in full swing with the latest RQ in Sydney, plus a minor in another Chinese tournament there. So we'll see if her standing continues, but before we even get into any of that, does the lore live up to the hype? Not much is known about LeBlanc's early life, except for the fact that she was born over 1,000 years ago and possesses this uniquely skilled magic specializing in illusions. She was an acolyte in the inner circle of the Iron Revenant Mordekaiser, a necromancer whose nightmarish empire subjugated everything before Noxus existed, and she was forced into his service, watched him torturously enslave his own demon Atakan back under his will, oppressively ruling the continent of Valoran for over 1,000 years. She approached the fiendish Hemomancer, blood mage if you will, Vladimir, considered a god by the Noxus barbarians, with an offer to bring about her master's downfall. And they dined in his lair, feasted as equals, and wove magic so dark that it turned the wine around the table sour and the roses withered, going from a once vibrant red to turning into black. She pledged to neutralize the source of his power, the immortal bastion, which was the fortress from which he ruled, cutting him off from the well of death, fueling his empire. They rallied an alliance of Noxus tribes that marched on to conquest, and they confronted him, and the Cabal cast Mordekaiser from the material realm by severing the anchors of his soul from his armor, which sounds very, very intense, and was later hidden far away beneath his own fortress and sealed away the Revenant's personal hound demons, Atakan and Tybok as well. Now, while the Black Rose was an order that existed for millennia as a secret cabal, its current iteration was formed by LeBlanc and Vladimir in the aftermath of Mordekaiser's defeat. And so now it serves to further the clandestine interests of those who can wield such dark magic. The barbarians who survived the Rune Wars built Noxus in the shadow of the Immortal Bastion, but the Pale Sorceress's greatest trick was to make the Noxus forget the dark power roiling within its own heart. For centuries, LeBlanc served in secret as an advisor to foreign dignitaries, appearing in many nations at once. Under her leadership, the Black Rose manipulated Noxus's nobility, its military, and even its throne, and was secretly responsible for a large number of the Empire's most significant military campaigns. She orchestrated the first war between Noxus and Demacia, where the Hand of Noxus, Scion, charged into battle to attack King Jarvan I, and LeBlanc used her magic to disguise herself as a Demacian soldier and blocked the chance of a Demacian rescue until both leaders were dead at each other's hands. One of her most interesting active relationships involves Jericho Swain, and in her desire to rule Noxus from the shadows, she manipulated a Noxian ruler, Grand General Borum Darkwill, and for decades she was poisoning his mind and sought to resurrect Scion from his tomb after his defeat. Upon seeing how uncontrollable the undead warrior was, Darkwill started to change his mind and began refusing the counsel from the Black Rose. As you would imagine, LeBlanc was not too keen to this, and so to regain control, she engineered a plot to fake her own death by manipulating the young nobleman named Jericho Swain into unwittingly exposing the Cabal and had her executed, or at least who he thought was LeBlanc. Now, with the assumption that LeBlanc was deceased and that the Black Rose was no more, they carried on, but after years of planning, Darkwill finally launched an invasion of Ionia, and in doing so, he was approached again by LeBlanc, and due to his growing paranoia and her sudden reappearance, he was easily seduced by her promises to extend his life. She and Darkwill then sent General Swain to die on the battlefields of Ionia. However, he survived, but lost an arm in the process and was cast out of the military in disgrace. Ultimately, Swain returned and discovered the power within the Immortal Bastion, the power of the demon realm. Through this power, he restored his physical form and for years had planned a coup, managing to kill Darkwill when the moment presented itself and claimed Grand General. Upon doing so, he established the Triferix, a council and governing body of 3 from Noxus, and they maintained the 3 pillars or core principles of might, vision, and guile. Keep a note on that. Now, of course, the Black Rose attempted to stop this, but Swain escaped, and though LeBlanc would try to assassinate him many times over the next few years, Swain's rule held sway. Now, before we get into the part where folks like me would know where she's from, a little bit more history. As part of her plot to control the great houses of Noxus, LeBlanc set her sights on the powerful house Medarda, which is described in the novel Ambessa, Chosen of the Wolf. She sent her 2 best mages, Rudo, a Solari, and Inyene, a Hemomancer, to install Tafik as her puppet. Inyene raised an army of rune soldiers to help Tafik defeat his rival in succession, Ambessa Medarda, which is a name that should sound familiar. Inyene's experience were so brutal, though, that Rudo abandoned the Black Rose and vowed to destroy the project, and so he joined forces with Ambessa to defeat Tafik and Inyene. LeBlanc realized she couldn't control House Medarda, and so instead decided to just destroy it. So after Ambessa defended the city from Tafik's rune soldiers, LeBlanc confronted her and ultimately left Ambessa alive so she could watch her family legacy crumble. So Ambessa obviously would seek revenge. Now fast forward to Arcane Season 2, and eventually Ambessa's son Kino would investigate the death of his father, and he uncovered evidence that there was an affair between Ambessa and Rudo, and there was rumored to be a child that inherited Rudo's magical abilities. The Cabal believed this person to be Kino and so captured him, but upon learning this news, Ambessa left him to die rather than save him. But this also set up her opportunity to seek revenge and try to destroy LeBlanc and the Cabal, seeking Hextech weapons and the like, etc., etc. After a failed assassination attempt on Ambessa, LeBlanc pivots and kidnaps Mel, and she disguises herself as Kino to manipulate her through an illusory labyrinth designed to awaken her latent powers. And she eventually kills Mel's assistant, Elora, in front of her as a demonstration of her power. She and Mel eventually work together to stop Ambessa from unleashing a calamity on Piltover, and LeBlanc ensnares and kills Ambessa in the process. But then Mel turns on LeBlanc, using her powers to expel the sorceress from the city. Now, the moment Mel defeats her, she's already planning what's about to come next. And so she plans this next move with Vladimir, which, by the way, he believes that Mel's arrival should be an opportunity that they should seek out. But LeBlanc doesn't see it that way, and instead she wants to seek a more dangerous weapon, this thing called a darkened glaive. LeBlanc seeks this ancient weapon. In order to locate it, she tricks the demon Atacon. She promises to set it free and instead traps it in her own chains until the location is revealed, which Atacon reluctantly complies. Now under her control, LeBlanc dispatches the demon to hunt down the weapon hidden within the Temple of Twilight, which was once hidden within the spirit realm. And its guardian, Yunara, is alerted. She and her new ally, Xin Zhao, suddenly seek to protect its location. Xin Zhao is overwhelmed by dark visions and interrupted by the voice of a spirit trapped within the weapon itself, or Zahen, discouraging them from taking it just for the sake of victory. But of course, by the time they reach it, LeBlanc and Otacon have already reclaimed it, and they have embedded the weapon within the demon's flesh, as one does with such a weapon. So Xin Zhao and Yunar were trying to retrieve it, but were losing the fight pretty badly, and yet something happened. Xin Zhao was able to commune with the spirit within the weapon, convincing it to go into his body as the host. And so Zahen ends up doing so, defeating Otacon in one fell swoop. But of course, all is not lost for LeBlanc, because even though she lost this battle, she didn't lose the war. She actually learned something, realizing that demons like the one wielded by Swain could actually be defeated. There's also a little fun fact. Her control over Otacon is also played out in a literal game for a comic called The Demon's Hand. And yes, you can actually play it. And also, Otacon is in Riftbound, and he's an order card, one of the yellow cards, which means he can run in the LeBlanc deck. So that's a pretty convenient coincidence, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. Now, her lore for League of Legends was fairly adequate. I mean, it had a reasonable backstory. There was a short story as well, but she didn't get a complete rework until the release of Legends of Runeterra and her character within that. And so in Legends of Runeterra, they gave her a genuine narrative anchor. And she appeared in the Ionian story, Everyone and Everywhere, as well as other novels and comics. The Legend of Runeterra cards, however, were a little undercooked. I mean, she had quick attacks, so that means she would strike first, and her champion levels up after seeing 15 or more damage. And she does have creating a mirror image, so there is that part, but the community overall felt like it didn't really capture her character. All of this stuff about her lore, and yet a lot of the mechanics just didn't really seem to jive. So while she was just a generic Noxian attacker in that game, did she suffer the same fate in Riftbound? LeBlanc's playstyle is truly unique and adds a completely different dimension to gameplay and strategy, so let's get into the cards. We start with her legend card, LeBlanc Deceiver. When you conquer or hold, you may discard one and exhaust me to play a ready reflection unit token there. It becomes a copy of another unit there. Give it temporary. The temporary keyword threaded through her gameplay is a mechanic passed down from Legends of Runeterra with the ephemeral keyword there. And it evokes LeBlanc's flavor pretty well. I mean, in Riftbound, you have to earn your copy by conquest, and you pay for it through discard, which is much like her ambitious nature. And when you compare this to the Legends of Runeterra kit, this feels way more on brand with LeBlanc's story. I mean, leveling up after 15 plus damage, I mean, that really missed her character, right? And Riftbound's legend ability manages to capture who she is from her League of Legends abilities. Plus, we already have somebody who does the excessive damage thing. Mirror Image is her signature spell at a cost of 3 energy and 2 power, whether that's mind or order. And it says choose a unit, play a ready reflection unit token to your base. It becomes a copy of that unit, give it temporary, which you kill it at the start of its controller's beginning phase before scoring. So this is named after the passive ability in League of Legends, which spawns a clone of her right at her feet. And in Legends of Runeterra, this is a copy of an ally, but it's at slow speed, which is outside of combat in that game. And in Riftbound, it's also not an action or a reaction either, so similarly at slow speed, but it enters ready and is used more proactively because you can move it to either battlefield. And this is clearly on point given LeBlanc's ability to create copies of herself and others, and this card put in a lot of work for me in pre-Rift events. The epic champion unit out of mind, LeBlanc Everywhere at Once, is a 4-cost, 4-might unit that reads backline, so it must be assigned combat damage last, and your temporary effects at my battlefield don't trigger. So she protects the illusions from dying, and without her presence, temporary units die. With her there, the deception holds. So it's a clear representation of her persistent and continued presence throughout Runeterra, amassing an army and maintaining her influence over time. And note the flavor text on the card there: vision, might, guile. It's almost comical how history repeats itself. The Triferics, Noxus 3 ruling principles, she's basically noting it as a mockery since she's been behind the scenes controlling Noxus for eternities. Also a pretty strong card to come out of the champion zone with the no power cost either, and being able to continuously add all of these temporary reflections, it would be imagined, around her. She could hold a battlefield pretty well. The other champion unit, LeBlanc Fragmented Out of Order, is a 3-cost 1 yellow power unit with a 3 might with the text Assault +1 while I'm an attacker, and Death Knell, draw 1 card. If it's your beginning phase, draw 2 instead. Clearly how you get that second card draw is by giving it temporary from the legend ability, it dying in the beginning phase, strategy like that. Thematically, in her lore, every apparent defeat is really just a planned retreat that leaves her better positioned, gaining knowledge of her opponents in the process. And so drawing the cards when she dies is the mechanical expression of that, card draws being the knowledge, and her apparent loss is intelligence gained. The assault keyword added on there just kind of feels thrown on. I guess it kind of captures the League of Legends distortion mechanic where she has this burst when she charges in, or the quick attack in Legends of Runeterra where she deals damage first. Not really represented here or anywhere, to be frank, but probably a close tie to that, I would suppose, and frankly not really needed for the flavor of LeBlanc in any form here. There's also a quick rules clarification about the reflection tokens that was spoken about by the game creator Dave Guskin that he mentioned on social medias, where he said there was ambiguity causing judge confusion globally about copying tokens with the reflection. He notes that the Chinese judge community received guidance that tokens copy everything about the copy unit, including whether it's a token or a card, replacing the reflection's own trait of being a token. So if a reflection copies a loyal Poro, for instance, which is a card, it becomes a loyal Poro card and stops being a token. And if it copies a bird token, it remains a token. It will officially be in the July Vendetta rules update, mostly because the current guidance stands through the regional qualifier in Sydney and the Suzhou minor, and he didn't want to disrupt a lot of the planning that had been going on from different teams leading into these events. But this kind of rules clarification is genuinely important to understand if you're going to be playing as LeBlanc, and what you copy and what that copy becomes mechanically becomes significant. Gameplay wise, LeBlanc runs the Mind and Order domains, and her game plan seems to be conquer and hold battlefields to trigger the legend ability, generate temporary copies of your highest might units that have special abilities. Death Knell is just more of an added seasoning to the overall flavor and of this gameplay mechanic. And if you run everywhere at once, it prevents those copies from dying, so you can amass a large army for pretty cheap cost. But something I've noticed is that she rewards proactive aggression. She's not necessarily as much of a control player as most blue-yellow legends tend to be, like the Victors, for example. And the Chinese meta tends to be best of one, so I feel like a lot of people haven't really been able to adapt to her proactive playstyle yet, or the builds seem to be more focused on the Death Knell rewards rather than the reflection token capabilities, which feels honestly way more important to me, but what do I know, right? All in all, with best of 3 preparation, maybe she takes it down a few pegs. We'll see after this weekend, I guess. Overall, I had a pretty vague understanding of LeBlanc. I mean, she wasn't named directly in Arcane and then went off after that season, and I wasn't aware of what she was in League or Legends of Runeterra for that matter. So her being extremely hyped coming into this set It seemed to make sense to me on a grand scale. Her ability looks pretty awesome, but seeing how much care was put into her lore really gives me a newfound respect for the character. I mean, she's more than just a villain, especially considering she's been controlling everything from behind the scenes for so long, but also creating so many clones of herself that she's started to lose her own identity and awareness of who she is. I mean, some of the short stories also talk about that from the perspective of other clones saying, I'm the real LeBlanc, and each one believes that. Regarding her cards, I feel like Riot really corrected from the Legends of Runeterra version. The Legend ability really captures her character. The gameplay mechanics look super fun to play, very challenging for a player like myself, but her champion units tie everything together cleanly, and that signature spell is pretty bonkers, albeit a little expensive. A funny thought could be that her strength in the early meta is partially reflected in players not really knowing how to counter her, which feels very LeBlanc, right? I mean, she's most effective when opponents don't know how to play against her yet. So the meta will obviously adjust. It just needs a Swain-like character to probably take care of that. LeBlanc has been in the background of the Runeterra universe for longer than almost any other character, pulling the strings, running empires, and losing her sense of self in the process. But for League players, what did I miss? Is there anything about her gameplay or anything about her lore that really excites you? And for Riftbound players, is she playing the way that you expected? What kind of strategies are you using when you're bringing her to the table? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious because she feels oddly complex for such an aggressive legend. New episodes drop every week, so subscribe if that sounds like your thing, yada yada. But until next time, thanks for watching.